My name is James Hadaway, and I was born in Kingsport, Tennessee.
So you grew up pretty close near the Appalachian Mountains, which is just like notorious for really spooky stuff and tons of folklore and a lot of just really creepy monsters. And like, it's just know that you should not hike there at night. If you hear people saying your own name in the woods or hear voices in the woods, you shouldn't respond to them. So there's a lot of creepy stuff. And did that ever scare you growing up?
I always kind of thought of the mountains as like protectors. And like when I was really little, I used to be like super duper afraid of storms, which I think is, pretty common for little kids. But I remember like adults telling me, or I would hear adults talking about storms approaching, and they would always say things like, "Oh, it'll break up when it hits the mountains," and it usually does. And so I kind of always thought of them as these um, kind of like Goliath protectors that shielded us from bad things. Going out into the wilderness, hiking, camping, there are times where it gets a little creepy. I don't know if you've ever heard like a red fox cry out because it sounds exactly like a woman screaming. I've heard that more times than I care to count. I knew what it was, still creepy.
So you do you buy into all that though?
No,
And
no. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in monsters. I think the things in the woods that are scariest are the things that we already know are there.
so you had, to my understanding, a creepy experience though.
That's right. Yeah. So I was in my early 20s at the time. My friends and I used to go hiking in Smoky Mountain National Park a lot. On this particular hike, we had hiked for probably about 10 miles. We were deep in the woods. There was not a lot of humanity around us. We had put all our gear down. We built a fire, had a little something to eat. It was getting darker. We were all just kind of lounging around the campfire, and we heard him before we saw him, but a man came up to our camp very much out of nowhere. And I need to reemphasize, we are far away from humanity. He doesn't live there. He looked kind of like a hippie. He had on this like puffer vest that looked like maybe it was from Patagonia or something, and this sort of fleece jacket on underneath it. Then these kind of khaki pants that were really dirty, covered in mud. I think it's important to point out too that this guy had no backpack. He had no water. We're really, really deep in the woods. Everything seemed really fine until he just decided to sit down. I can't really put my finger on it. I can't explain exactly why I was so uncomfortable. I can tell you, however, that everybody else felt the same way when we talked about it later. Everything seemed just slightly off. It was almost like there was like a perceptible hum in the air. And the guy, the longer he stayed, he just made me more and more and more uncomfortable. Everything turned a little bit scary when one of my friends he said, well, hey man, we've got an early start tomorrow and we want to make sure we get plenty of rest. And he just kind of went stone face. But then he said, well, now you're just not being very neighborly, are you? But he just had this kind of penetrating stare. It was exceptionally creepy. I actually remember thinking to myself, this is how horror movies start. He got up and started to walk off. Once he got out of earshot, we were all like, what the hell was that? Who the hell was that? We watched him and watched him and watched him until we couldn't see him anymore. And then one of my friends said, well, I guess we're sleeping in shifts tonight. And we did. I don't think any of us slept particularly well. Every time we heard like a branch fall or a twig snap somewhere in the woods, it's like, oh hell, he's back. He never showed up again. Never saw him again. Never heard from him again. We got in our cars. We drove off. But I can tell you right now that his face is just seared into my mind. Because it was genuinely one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. And it wasn't ghosts, it wasn't goblins, it was a man. And I think that's way scarier than the stuff of fiction.